Hello and welcome to RWR Plays TEW 2020. This is WCW Lives On Chapter 33, and I'm really excited to be recording today because it's the first time in quite some time that I've been able to get to this, and I'm looking forward to starting to bring you what took place after WCW Halloween Havoc in our series. Just as a reminder, of course, we are playing as Eric Bischoff as if WCW continued to exist beyond the end of March in 2021, and we are now up to the end of October. In fact, we're into November with the next episode of Monday Nitro. If you have an interest in continuing to watch this series, and we will continue to bring new episodes out. I appreciate that the gaps between episodes as of late have been a lot longer than they previously were. Don't know exactly when that's going to end. It may even end after this episode. I may have the chance in the next couple of days to record a few episodes to build some up and then actually be able to release them kind of for the next couple of weeks, but that's not absolutely confirmed. But whatever the case, the series will continue on an ad hoc basis, and if you want to stay up to date with that and see them when they come out, then give us a subscribe to continue to follow along with the series. And of course, if you are just joining us today for the first time, I think it's well worth going back and watching the previous 32 episodes of this series, because obviously we've been going since the relaunch back in May of the company in WCW 2001. I'm not going to recap what took place at Halloween Havoc here, because I'm going to do that as part of Monday Nitro that's about to kick off. But of course, this is the episode of Monday Nitro that we're bringing to you now following Halloween Havoc. And so that's what's coming up on today's show, as well, of course, of a Saturday night. There's 4 weeks until our next pay-per-view, and then, of course, 4 weeks after that will be Starrcade. So we're hitting a pretty important point in our series coming up. One last plug before we get into the meat of today's episode. This YouTube channel, of course, is attached to a podcast, the Random Wrestling Review, that I host every single week. We've been doing it now for nearly 4 years. We've been reviewing all kinds of major wrestling shows from WWE, WCW, ECW, AWA, AEW, NXT, NWA. I'm sure I'm missing someone. That's why I'm stumbling at the moment. But we've been covering all kinds of shows from all those people, all the way back to 1984 through to the present day. Our most recent show was both nights of this year's WrestleMania. We've done over 140, I think there is now by the time this episode comes out. So go and check it out. It's available on all the usual places you get your podcasts. Anyway, that's enough plugging from me. Now we go on to today's episode of Nitro. So the first episode of Nitro following Halloween Havoc is coming from Colorado, the Butler Hancock Pavilion, and it starts with a video package which basically plays through and summarizes all the major events from last night's Halloween Havoc. This includes DDP defeating Kevin Nash in a loser leaves WCW match, and Nash's subsequent promo where he told Tony Schiavone to pass on a package to the man it belonged to, saying that maybe the fans will realize he wasn't such a bad guy after all when they see what's in the package. Mike Awesome also got the biggest win of his career with a pinfall victory in defense of the US title against Sting in the main event of that show, of course. The show did have a slightly strange match order, in fairness. Shane Douglas outthought Ric Flair en route to taking victory in his match with the Nature Boy. Totally Buff clinged on to their tag team titles, but felt the wrath of Bill Goldberg in the aftermath of that match against Goldberg and Jim Duggan. Rey Mysterio Jr. took overall victory in the Cruiserweight Grand Prix with a win over AJ Styles in the final, and Booker T regained the WCW World title with victory over Jeff Jarrett after Konnan and Billy Kidman cleared the ringside area of Jarrett's henchmen Mike Sanders and John Cena. So all of that stuff was detailed in the video package, a segment rating of 76, a really decent way to get the show underway this week on Nitro. And then after the title sequence, Eric Bischoff is shown in the ring where the camera goes immediately. And Bischoff welcomes the fans to Monday Nitro and says that tonight there is no time for messing around. He wants to get straight down to business, and that includes announcing the new #1 contender to WCW champion Booker T, who won the title last night, and who will face him with the title on the line at WCW Uncensored in 4 weeks' time on pay-per-view. He says that after securing a major victory last night at Halloween Havoc, Booker T will face DDP at Uncensored for the title. So this had a segment rating of 79 and saw Bischoff announcing the title match for Uncensored. Bischoff then said that this wasn't his only major announcement tonight, and he said for the second announcement he wanted everyone to pay close attention to the big screen. A video then plays with stirring orchestral music and a voiceover saying, "Starrcade is the pinnacle of this sport, the Super Bowl of professional wrestling. The men and women who step between these ropes work a lifeline to make it to the biggest night in the calendar. To be in the main event of Starrcade is to be the man, but only a select few get to say that they have made it. People who read like a who's who of the industry, names like Ric Flair, Sting, Dusty Rhodes, Harley Race, Lex Luger, Bill Goldberg, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, Rowdy Roddy Piper, Kevin Nash, Bret Hart, and Scott Steiner. This year, to mirror the achievement, WCW is creating a challenge like no other, the Starrcade Series. The 8 top-ranked competitors will face off in 2 groups of 4, with the winners of both groups facing one another in the main event of Uncensored, and the victor in that match will go on to face whoever is champion at Starrcade. So the video then shows who the groups are. Group A is Curt Hennig, Mike Awesome, Scott Steiner, and Sting. And Group B is Bill Goldberg, Ric Flair, Shane Douglas, and Vampiro. And it all begins tonight. So that's the end of the video package. Eric Bischoff comes back to major cheers, and he says right after the break, the first match in the Starrcade Series will be taking place. So here, a segment rating of 80, a very, very good segment rating where we had all of the biggest, or most of the biggest stars in the company in this video package, in fairness. And we really are now on the road to Starrcade over the next 2 months, building towards this, towards that main event. And of course, this Starrcade Series is a major part of that. After the break, then, the first match in the Starrcade Series saw Sting take on Curt Hennig in a Group A match, and this one was won by Sting by pinfall after 16 minutes and 31 seconds. Segment rating here of 67. Sting had an in-ring performance of 77. Curt Hennig an in-ring performance of 64. I was expecting just a little bit more from this match, if I'm perfectly honest, but ultimately the Starrcade Series has begun with a pretty decent encounter to get us underway. In the next segment, Tony Schiavone stood backstage and comments on the great match we have just seen, then turns his attention to tonight and his first guest of the evening, Rey Mysterio Jr. Schiavone says that last night, Rey Mysterio Jr. took overall victory in the Cruiserweight Grand Prix and will now face Great Sasuke at Uncensored in what is sure to be an amazing match for the Cruiserweight title. Mysterio thanked Schiavone and the fans and said that AJ Styles took him to the limit last night. He says he's now looking forward to getting his chance to win back the Cruiserweight title. Schiavone then says that he has to change gears a little because last night Kevin Nash, on his last night in the company, asked Schiavone to give this bag to its rightful owner, and Schiavone holds up the bag. Schiavone says that the only way he could understand who the rightful owner was to look inside of the bag, for which he apologizes, but has now determined that the owner is Rey Mysterio Jr. Schiavone passes the bag to Rey Mysterio Jr., who is looking slightly bemused by the whole thing. He puts his hand inside, and when he pulls out the contents, it is clear that it is a Rey Mysterio Jr. mask. Rey Jr. asks Schiavone what he's expected to do with this, and Schiavone apologizes and says that he doesn't know. Rey continues to look confused as we go to an advert break. So a segment rating here of 60 as Schiavone delivers the package that Kevin Nash gave to him on his last night in the company to Rey Mysterio Jr. The second match of the night saw Air Raid versus 3 Count in a Cruiserweight Tag Team Division match. Air Raid get the victory in 8 minutes and 29 seconds when AJ Styles pinned Evan Courageous. They set a good segment rating of 56, and I'm pretty pleased with that. And AJ Styles, having been pretty firmly established in the Cruiserweight Grand Prix of the previous month, is now getting the kind of in-ring performances, or at least the improved in-ring performances as we hoped. He got a 54. The next best was Evan Courageous on a 45. After this, as the commentators ready themselves for the next match, Tommy Dreamer storms to the ring and grabs a microphone. Dreamer says he doesn't care what is scheduled next. He wants Nick Gage to get out here and face him like a man after what happened last week. The commentators remind everyone that Nick Gage attacked both Dreamer and Terry Funk as they were in the midst of a match on last week's show. Nick Gage then emerged from the back two and stood in the ring about 5 feet away from Dreamer. Dreamer challenges Gage to a match here and now, but instead Gage spits at Dreamer and then leaves the ring. Dreamer wipes the spit away and smiles at Gage, and then out of nowhere Terry Funk attacks Gage from behind. Gage gets knocked back into the ring, and Funk and Dreamer take turns punching Gage as he staggers from one to the other until he finally drops to the mat and rolls out of the ring. Gage walks away angrily, vowing revenge, while Funk and Dreamer shake hands in the ring. So segment rating here of 41. The story between Nick Gage and these two continues onwards, and this was kind of our way of showing that Funk and Dreamer are on the same page and they're not kind of going to continue the tension that's built between them two. I do have a sort of vision of for how this is going to go forward, and people who've been watching the series will be aware that I've been kind of booking this on the fly, not really sure of the direction it's going in. I'm still not absolutely certain of the end destination, but I have a way forward at least for the next couple of weeks and potentially as much as the next month. The next match was another in the Starrcade series in Group A, and it sees Scott Steiner and Mike Awesome in their match. This one spills to the outside as it gets more heated than is expected, with both men aggressively going about trying to win it. They throw each other into ring posts and the guardrails, and it ends in a double countout when Mike Awesome splashes Scott Steiner through a table from the top turnbuckle to the outside, and both men are unable to answer the count. We've got a segment rating of 68, which is really decent. Look at the rating in-ring performance of Mike Awesome, 82, easily the best he's had so far. Steiner an 84. Mike Awesome obviously still enjoying a bump in popularity following his major victory over Sting at Halloween Havoc. And despite Steiner being off his game, they still got a segment rating of 68. So pretty pleased with that, especially as it was a double countout. Next up, we have backstage Tony Schiavone with Ric Flair for an interview. Tony Schiavone says that next week Flair will face Shane Douglas in both men's first match in the Starrcade series, a match that will be a rematch from last night's battle, which Shane Douglas picked up the win. Schiavone asks Flair what he will do differently in 7 days' time. Flair says that Douglas may think he can walk the walk just because he pulled off a cheap trick last night, but he needs to remember that he'll be in there with the dirtiest player in the game, and if Douglas wants to play dirty, then he's all in as well. Schiavone asks Flair how he feels about the overall Starrcade series and his chances of winning the tournament. Flair says that there ain't nobody who has headlined Starrcade more than him, so if anybody knows what it takes to get there again, it's the Nature Boy. He says he's going to deal with Shane Douglas first, then he'll face up to the next challenge. So segment rating here of 61, Ric Flair hyping up his match next week with Shane Douglas in the Starrcade series. The next match is Psychosis versus Chavo Guerrero Jr., and Chavo wins it in 7 minutes and 22 seconds by using underhanded tactics. The match seemed to suffer as a consequence of an injury sustained by Psychosis, who got a corneal abrasion, which I assume is an injury to Psychosis's eye, which is not a particularly good injury to get. A segment rating of 48 here, and Chavo Guerrero Jr. takes the victory. After another break, the cameras go backstage and find Sharmell Sullivan with Jeff Jarrett and the rest of the Jarrett administration. Sullivan asks Jarrett how he's feeling 24 hours after losing the WCW World title back to Booker T. Jarrett angrily says that last night the world witnessed a coup d'etat on live pay-per-view when Booker T stole the WCW World title away from him. Jarrett continued that this was a conspiracy from the highest echelons of WCW management who connived to hand Booker T a rematch for the belt through to the plebeian referee who missed a whole heap of interference that should have resulted in a disqualification. Sharmell tries to reason with Jarrett that there was as much interference from the Jarrett administration as anybody else, so she doesn't see how he can complain. Jarrett tells Sharmell that he's not complaining, and that's why he is laying the blame squarely on the filthy animals, an apt name, he says, for a bunch of treasonous thugs. He then challenges Conan, Rey Mysterio Jr. and Billy Kidman to a match next week on Nitro with the Jarrett administration. So this was not a great segment, Sharmell Sullivan bringing it down to a 50, although the performance of Jeff Jarrett was apparently fantastic, so maybe it should have been higher, I don't know. But whatever the case, only a 50 for this particular one, as Jarrett challenges Conan and the rest of the filthy animals. Talking of six-man tag matches, that's what we get next, as the Mamalukes, James Maritato, Frankie Cicero and Johnny the Bull take on Balls Mahoney and Chaos Theory in a six-man tag. This was a terrible match, according to the game, and a Chaos Theory defeated the Mamalukes when Tajiri pinned Cicero. Segment rating of 49. James Maritato was easily the best wrestler in the match, and Johnny the Bull was a weak link, struggling to keep up with everybody else's in-ring performances. So the feud between the FBI and Chaos Theory has kind of continued into this six-man tag. Next up, Tony Schiavone is in the ring, and he confirms that next week 3 more matches in the Starrcade series will take place. Shane Douglas will take on Ric Flair, Scott Steiner is up against Kurt Hennig, and Mike Awesome will battle Sting. He also confirms that the Animals and the Jarrett administration has been confirmed for next week as well. Speaking of Jarrett, Schiavone says that his guest at this time is the man who beat Jarrett last night at Halloween Havoc to reclaim the WCW title, Booker T. Booker T comes to the ring, and Tony Schiavone asks how it feels to be King of the Hill again in WCW. Booker says that he feels good because he knows in his heart of hearts that he should never have lost the title in the first place, and he says that now the belt is back where it belongs. Schiavone then asks Booker what he makes about the announcement earlier tonight that his opponent for the title at Uncensored will be Diamond Dallas Page. Booker T says that he knows some people don't believe that DDP has done enough to be given the #1 contendership, but he's not one of them. He says DDP has done amazing things in his career, and any time a legendary veteran like DDP gets handed an opportunity to go for the title, they've earned it just by virtue of their past achievements, and he welcomes the chance to test himself again against the guy he has always looked up to. So this got a segment rating of 67, Booker T just laying the groundwork for his defense of the WCW title against DDP in 4 weeks' time. The main event of the show sees Bill Goldberg against Vampiro in the first Group B match in the Starrcade series, and Goldberg wins this in 14 minutes and 14 seconds by pinfall, a segment rating of 74, which is a really decent main event. Goldberg had an in-ring performance of 90 and Vampiro a 68. Apparently the match suffered a little because of not enough selling being shown, but Goldberg picks up his first victory in a pretty decent encounter here in the Starrcade series. And that's how Nitro finishes. So a pretty decent show overall. 73 increases our popularity pretty much everywhere that we are being aired, and some decent encounters. Goldberg obviously and Vampiro match of the night, but also a pretty decent match between Steiner and Mike Awesome. Sting and Kurt Hennig also did pretty well, although I was hoping for a little bit more. A good episode of Nitro comes to an end. Now, before we finish today, of course, we still have the small matter of WCW Saturday Night to deal with, and we'll go to that next. Okay, so this is the point where I have to apologise. Very frustratingly, I recorded the whole of the WCW Saturday Night episode as well, and for whatever reason, it just didn't save at the end of the recording, and so as a consequence, I'm just going to quickly summarise what took place on Saturday night instead of going through it as I normally would. The great news for us is that we got an attendance of 3,750, which is about 1,500 fans more than we got the last time we were in the Mid-South region, so that's a really good sign of progress for WCW overall. On the show, Rick Steiner defeated Alpha Jr. in the opener, a match rating of 60, most of which was due to Rick Steiner. This was only a 6-minute match. As you can see from the booking, Alpha Jr. is not featuring in our long-term plans any longer. After that, Funk and Dreamer were involved in an interview by Sharmell Sullivan, and she asked them how they feel ahead of the four-way match they are involved in on Nitro this coming Monday for a shot at the tag team titles. And Funk says that they're confident they know the field is going to be tough, but they are focused on the goal at hand. So that was just really introducing and I guess advertising the fact that there's a four-way tag team match on Nitro coming, and it will be to determine the new number one contenders to the WCW titles. One of the other teams that are involved in that match are the American Mavericks, and they got an easy victory over No Names Adam Booker and Eric Priest for a match rating of 25. Bill Goldberg was in a pre-taped segment which took place just after Nitro, where Schiavone spoke to him and asked him how he's feeling after his match and win in the Starrcade series. And Goldberg said that he was satisfied. That's 1 down, 2 to go, and he says he will be at Starrcade and nobody is going to stop him. We then had another match in the women's round robin. We're kicking off the penultimate round of matches in that tournament, and Alexis Lurie went to a time limit draw with Kana in this one, 15 minutes for a segment rating of 24, which is one of the highest the women have managed up to this point. We also then had Sean O'Haire in a backstage interview by Sharmell Sullivan, and she asked O'Haire how much of a setback it was to lose to his former partner Chuck Palumbo at Halloween Havoc, and O'Haire responded that he'd already put that behind him, and he says that the only thing he has in mind is taking out each and every one of the Gothic Collective, and as far as he is concerned, every one of them have a target on their backs. And the show was ended by a great match between Lance Storm and Shane Helms that went just over 10 minutes, and Lance Storm won by submission in that one. So a really decent show for WCW Saturday Night, probably one of the better ones overall, and in total the TV taping was really good. Pretty happy with that. Achieved our primary objective, which as always is to just grow the audience and get everyone starting to look forward to Uncensored. And Uncensored, of course, has been moved in the calendar. I've moved a couple of pay-per-views around. Uncensored I moved to November because there was a gap, because I wanted to move Mayhem to May. I just thought Mayhem in May sounded much more logical, but also because Slamboree used to be in May, I moved that to, I believe it was August. We've already had that, of course, in the calendar. So there's a couple of the pay-per-views that have been moved around in the calendar, and there may be one or two more before we get back around to sort of May and June. Before I go, I just want a quick check-in on WWE and their episode of Raw. A positive feedback for Raw, but not perhaps as positive as some of the episodes we've seen, and that is understandable when you see that Dangerous by Design defeat Too Cool in the main event. Dangerous by Design, by the way, is Raven and William Regal, that very strange tag team. Chris Benoit defeated David Flair was one of the other big matches. We saw Ivory defeat Trish Stratus for the women's titles. That's interesting. But overall, not a particularly prestigious week of Monday Night Raw, and therefore their show rating reflected that. That is everything that we've got for you this week. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please give it a like. It's really helpful, and it gives me a little bit of motivation to get these episodes out a little bit quicker than I have been. I am determined to keep going, and I will be continuing to bring out episodes on an ad hoc basis going forward. The problem is I just don't always know how frequent the episodes will be given my current level of busyness in my life in general, but I hope potentially that the next episode will be within a week, simply because I may have a little bit of time this weekend to actually record an episode or two. So hopefully that will be the case, but whatever the case, be assured I will be continuing the series, as I've discussed previously, at least all the way until we get to Starrcade, and at that point I'll need to make a decision about where we go from then. But for now, thank you for tuning in, and please join us again, and I will see you at that point.